Hello. Put your microphone. And good evening and welcome everybody. And we are really very appreciative and thank you everybody for making. Today we have a session, FAO in collaboration with FAO, in collaboration with the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation, Federal Government of Somalia, on building climate resilience, particularly in the context of fragility and the Somalia path to food security. And with that, I will probably be very conscious with the time and hand it over to Etienne to give us the opening remarks. Then we'll have a very brief presentation and followed by a panel discussion. So thank you everybody, and I will hand over the mic to Etienne. Mr. Etienne is FAO Somalia country representative. He has been working in Somalia for quite some time and has a very good knowledge background on Somalia and particularly the agriculture sector. Welcome, Mr. Etienne.
I should call you Mr. Kainan then. So thank you. Thank you very much, Kainan. I must say that doing this as the last session of the day, quite late in the evening, in the whatever it is, 8 or 9. So basically the second week of the COP doesn't make it easier, and then our neighbors, the Australians, having a party. So we'll try to make this smooth and quick and short and to the point. Thanks very much, Kainan, and thanks also for initiating this. This is done in partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, but you've been driving and initiating this meeting. So we did provide some inputs, but all great thanks to you. Yes, as Kainan said, I've been working in Somalia for the past 5 years, and usually when I take the mic in different events, the first paragraph is always about Somalia being a land of insecurity, Somalia being a land of poverty, Somalia being a land where our production is low, where there is no rain, where there is, I'd say pretty much what people expect you to say about Somalia. Also a rather negative, gloomy picture of Somalia. And my point here is to say that Somalia is a land of opportunities. I've seen tremendous progress in my 5 years. 5 years is short, but I've learned that a lot has happened. Maybe not so much happened before my 5 years, but certainly since I joined, and it's not because of me, many things have happened in terms of the government strengthening its governance, its capacity altogether, with support from ourselves. But I think I'm looking at the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Livestock, Ministry of Fishing much stronger now. The government as a whole, and in terms of insecurity, I think we see some progress made in terms of fighting Al-Shabaab. I look at Somalia being part of the East African community. That's a very positive trend. The lifting of the arms embargo, being part of the Security Council, and of course the debt relief was something that, from an economic point of view, will help Somalia substantially. FAO Somalia is a large office. Historically, we've been the largest office, but it's not so much about what FAO does, is what we do collectively as the UN system. I was in a panel earlier on. I think the challenges that lay ahead Somalia are really calling for joint action. I think FAO alone wouldn't be able to do much. We did make significant we did achieve a significant milestone with the GCF. That is a tremendous achievement. It's not FAO's achievement, it's a nationwide collective achievement. We are the recipient of the fund. We worked on the preparing the document, but it was really a national priority led by the president himself. And I think that without his push at the time when Mafalda, the executive director of the GCF, came, we wouldn't have gotten this funding. So 80 million, this is the amount, plus 15 million of co-finance is substantial. Nevertheless, this is covering an 7-year period. So what we hope from the GCF is that this sort of funding will attract additional funding, so that this GCF constitutes an anchor where hopefully much more funding will come. There's nothing in the GCF that FAO hasn't done in the past, but the way I see GCF's contribution is that it allows us to implement a comprehensive project program that addresses issues around climate change, that covers the whole country, that brings in different sets of activities that are not limited in time, which is often what happens with some of the other funding we got. So it is definitely a milestone for us, for the government, for the GCF. I was in South Korea, and I think there is a lot of expectation that lays on our shoulder, and also for the GCF to demonstrate that this type of program can operate in fragile context. There's going to be challenges, but I think, again, with the government's posture, the government's capacity, the way the government is now handling governance around multi-year, multi-ministerial, multi-geographical projects, brings me to think that there is great hope that this project will succeed and that we will get additional funding. I think another example I want to take that FAO is leading is our program on the JOAR offstream storage program. Again, this is exactly what the government wants us to do. This is a program that tackles the issues around water, the too much, the too little of water. It's a program that engages multi-donors, multi-UN agencies, multi-government entity through the ministry, and it's multi-year. Don't know if I said that. And that's exactly how we see ourselves moving ahead as the UN, and how the government wants us to move together in partnership. And again, coming back to my earlier point, I really think that if we are to make a difference in Somalia, it is going to be through this type of partnership. I'm aware of the time, so I will stop here. But just to say again, want to congratulate the Minister of Agriculture. The Minister is not here, but you've made substantial gains in terms of endorsing so many new laws and acts and decrees. The same thing applies for the Minister of Fisheries, Ministry of Livestock. I see a very different relationship today between the federal government of Somalia, the federal member state, which again is very encouraging, is a prerequisite for future development of the country. And then maybe also for us, I mean, since I joined, and even more so at the peak of the humanitarian crisis, we've been told over and over by the government that they want all of us collectively to focus our portfolio, our way of thinking towards development. And I'm happy to say that I believe for the first time in FAO's history, we have a portfolio now that is about 70% made of multi-year programming, and just a 30% portfolio on humanitarian funding. Of course, you can argue and say that's because we have gotten less funding for the humanitarian, or because we are not yet facing a crisis. But I also think that it's because the government's effort in helping us to help them, and them to help us, to go with a common message and really push that necessity to really invest into Somalia in the long term. And when I retire, which is going to happen soon, I will work for the private sector and work in Somalia and invest in Somalia, because I really believe there is massive opportunity, not just for us, for the private. Emphasize that she wants to see the private sector playing a bigger role, and I believe that a large part of the future of the country lays on ownership, government ownership, but also the private sector. There's much more I would like to say, but again, it's late, and I prefer that the panelists have time to bring in their point, and then maybe we have a bit of an exchange. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Etienne, for setting the scene. And I will probably also take a few slides so that we can all of us have a clear picture of Somalia agricultural landscape and what climate has done to the normal agriculture. Nowadays we usually say that climate change is the new norm, is a new reality, and people need to embrace and live with the new norm in terms of the panel. Somalia multi-year hazard trends. You can see that in the 60s we used to have either 1 or 2 scenarios a decade. A period of 10 years we used to have either one scenario within a decade. And if you come to the 90s, you will see that is a tremendous increase. And if you come to the 2000, it is every year. And the projection is that it will become even much worse. So imagine the traditional pastorals, imagine the normal farmers, who most of them are again substantial farmers or small scale holder farmers. Climate change in Somalia, probably the implications are a lot of displacement, reduced income because of a lot of overtake has happened to livestock, food insecurity, resource-based conflict, the water catchments, pastoral and agriculture conflicts, and then the root causes are of course conflict, infrastructure and capacity deficit. Then there is also increased frequency of severe climate shocks, and lastly inequality, which drives a lot of these things. And on the ongoing sectors in terms of value chain development in agriculture, particularly crop here. In Somalia we have 3 main areas of agriculture, which are all of them ministries. There's Ministry for Agriculture, which is crop. Then there's Ministry for Livestock, which looks at livestock, because we have over 50 million heads of livestock. I think there are over 60 million heads of livestock in Somalia, the biggest population. And then we have the longest also sea coast in Somalia, which is around 3,300 miles. So basically you can imagine that they are big sectors. And in agriculture we look at value chain development, climate smart agriculture, infrastructure development, of course JOSP, which was mentioned, which is JOAR offspring project. These were projects that used to mitigate flooding and also increase agricultural production in the Shabelle area. I think there were previously government investments by China and other nations. There were huge schemes within the JOSP area, but they were depleted due to 30 years of negligence, fragility. But now we are rehabilitating those infrastructures. If you come to livestock, then there is the value chain, also development of livestock, meat, milk, hide and skins, and etc. Then you look at the market system development, ecosystem in terms of rangeland management, and policy and capacity building. For infrastructure, we look at infrastructure development and early warning systems. And there are also approximately budgetings on that, which we envision to raise around 200 million USD for these infrastructures. The future for pastoralism in terms of transformative flagship projects, we are looking at concepts in terms of focusing to promote sustainable climate resilient food systems, water infrastructure, water resource management, particularly rangeland management, animal health services, value chain and market development, institution and policy, One Health approach with partners, funding from USAID, EU, and Denmark, Canada, World Bank, AFDB, and GCF. Overall, inclusive, sustainable, and climate resilience pastoral livelihoods. And the outcomes are clearly, I don't want to go line by line. We also have an integrated watershed management for Somalia, a transformative flagship initiative, and there is a concept on that. The target is around 90 million, and looking to target or benefit around 10 million people. And this will also be partly in the GCF project that's already funded, but we are still looking at areas to fill also. There are gappings. Then there is sustainable green climate resilient in terms of riverine. We have infrastructures that are already rehabilitated, but there are no follow-up projects in terms of assisting the farmers in seed systems, in extension, and particularly climate smart agriculture. And the budgeting is around 150 million for 5 years. That's what we are targeting, and reaching around 2 million farmers. The trace of climate financing in Somalia and the gaps. I think Somalia had an ambitious 55.5 billion for 10 years in the new NDC 2024. But again, over the years, we have only received around 321 million, which probably translated to 0.03% of what we requested. Summary of investment needed with estimate budgets in terms of infrastructure, agriculture research, value chain, market system development, policy and regulation. For agriculture, we are looking at around 153 million. On livestock sector, we are looking at the same research, strengthening key livestock value chains, enhancing animal feed resources, strengthening Somalia animal health system, policy and capacity for around 100 million, and a cross-cutting in terms of early warning, investment in climate adaptation, and also policy regulation and baseline information, which looks at around 90 million. I will stop there and say thank you so much. And with that, I will wish to call upon our panelists, starting with, I'm opening my phone so that I don't miss the names. I'm very poor with the naming sometimes, so I don't want to get them wrong. Okay, I will use the screen. Thank you so much. I wish to welcome Laura from SGR, specialist policy engagement at early and within the umbrella of SGR. I will also call Ibrahim Bamba, GCF sub-regional manager for Africa, and Martin Fragen, African Development Bank. And lastly, I will call Sylvia Webbs, I hope I have pronounced it right, from FAO HQ. And I will say we have a real gender balance here today. For the first time in Somali panelists, I think we tried. And I will probably give you a reflection of 1 minute. Then we'll go for question and answer session. And probably I will start with FAO, because FAO are the people who are mostly very near, very close with us, who have worked with us for quite some time and in many years. How can FAO assist countries in developing, looking forward policies and strategies that integrate climate change, considering into all programming areas? In particular, what role can FAO play in enhancing coordination among various stakeholders, including government institutions? Furthermore, how can FAO expertise be leveraged to promote adaptive capacities and mitigate risk and build long-term resilience in agriculture in Somalia particularly? Welcome, Madam Sylvia.
So can you hear me? Yes. Thank you very much for this question. I'm not very sure I have to answer it. You're doing it. You're leading the way. You're leading the way. You are focusing on livestock, the pastoralist livelihood, the crop livelihoods. You have put water at the center. I think this GCF formulation is a very good example of the right priorities and the way you've done it and the way you've done it so far. So I think there are two questions, the what you do and how you do it. And of course, bringing the finance, which is the essential enabling element into this answer. So what I'm learning and listening to the presentation and listening on the way forward, bringing public, private, but also community engagement is very critical. Having this multi-stakeholder dialogue in taking the decision in shaping the priorities and the investments in the country. I think you've been leading in that, and I think this is the way. And I would really like to take this home and say to the other countries which are also experiencing food insecurity and dryland situation and similar agro-pastoral livelihoods, that you are showing the way. It's extremely important to put people and nature at the center of all these decisions, all these type of investment. I think perhaps the only elements that could be a little bit reinforced in these three pillars is the role of biodiversity and nature. You need to have healthy soil, you need to have healthy ecosystem, you need to have trees, pasture land that are not degraded, and this is in line also with this convergence of efforts that we see with the 3 COPs this year. If you're looking at the Biodiversity Conference of Parties, the Climate Conference of Parties, and now we're going to the Land Degradation Conference of Parties, these are all sides of the same coin. And these solutions and this portfolio that you have in the GCF, again, because I've been looking at the various type of activities, are tagging and are activating solutions for these type of, the 3 type of crises. You can add the water crisis, for which we don't have a convention. So you are showing the way, and I would really like to congratulate you for that approach. We need to scale up. We need to reach the millions ambitions that you need to have, and over the long term. But this is still, you need to address both the urgent needs that will still come because of the climate extreme events will continue, and the root causes of these vulnerabilities, and bringing all the actors together, humanitarian development, but also the sustaining peace actors. I thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Madam. I'm listening to myself. Thank you so much, Madam Sylvia, for elaborating that. I will probably give the next question to AFDB's Martin, Director of Agriculture and Agro-Industry, which is an African mandated bank that's supposed to serve the African nations. Their role in addressing continental challenges, ensuring that countries in fragile contexts, particularly those severely affected by climate change, are prioritized initiatives aimed at building resilience agri-food system. Could you elaborate the strategies, criteria by AFDB to support these vulnerable nations in enhancing agriculture resilience? Welcome, Mr. Martin.
Thank you very much. Like you know, and like you have mentioned, Somalia is an agrarian nation. 83% of the GDP in Somalia comes from agriculture. And beside that, livestock is probably the most important part of the agricultural sector. 60% of the GDP comes from livestock. So if you're going to really fight fragility, agriculture is the way to go. We at the bank, we have a portfolio of about $247 million, of which 30%, about $72 million, is from agriculture. And we have about 4 or 5 big projects, but primarily what we are doing is, one is recovery of degraded pastures. Like Sylvia said, I believe very strongly that when livestock is your biggest industry, you really want to take care of pastures. Overgrazing and compaction and and destruction of pasture land is just going to create chaos, because people are going to be fighting over pasture land. So we spend a lot of time trying to use special grasses to recover these pastures. We also spend a lot of time trying to find water so that the pastures and the animals also can have enough water. But another part is extension. You need to teach pastoralists and also teach the government extension people how best to manage pastures. And then, of course, there is a very important part of livestock markets. Once you have your livestock and you really have to kind of get a fair price, you want to have a place where buyer and seller can meet. Yeah. Recently, the bank launched what we call the Climate Action Window, where you can actually request for special funds for technical assistance. So I really invite Somalia to actually ask for money up to $2 million, where you can actually get the resources you need to be able to support government, with specialists and experts, to be able to do the things you need to do to turn around agriculture in the continent. I just want to say one thing before I stop. Somalia actually has some of the brightest businessmen on the continent of Africa. If you go to Kenya, if you actually go to Minnesota in the US, Somali businessmen are actually calling the shots there. That's a powerhouse for the private sector. And I really hope, I'll talk about that later on, but I really hope that the bank can de-risk the sector for the private sector to kind of get involved, because the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that Somali have is out of this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin, and particularly for highlighting the role of private sector in Somalia, which is vibrant, resilient, and without the private sector in Somalia, we will have been nowhere. In fact, they're the ones who are running the nation, and they have done tremendously a very, very good job. And we wish the banks to explore ways of working with the private sector, because with them, they deliver 100%. And I will move to our next panelist. Probably I will start with Laura, then come back to my friend from GCF. Laura, in terms of policies, particularly we know that research and policies go hand in hand, and looking at SGIAR, particularly being a very research institution, I wanted to ask policy engagement perspective, what are the critical policy gaps that need to be addressed in building resilient food systems? We know that there is the ICA, which works within 8 or is it 18 or 16 countries in Africa, a coalition that helps African countries develop policies around climate and how to mitigate and adapt in climate. Probably if you could elaborate more on that. Then also touch on research on policies and how international organizations like IRLI influence and shape policies to promote sustainable agriculture and food security in fragile context. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much. Yes. It is strange to hear yourself as you speak. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for those questions. So I think I would start out with saying, I'm still learning about the Somalia context, so I might not be able to specifically point out certain policy gaps, but I think it's a good question, and I would really come back to the title of resilient food systems when talking about this, because I think any sort of policy that you have, first of all, they all need to be coherent. They all need to speak to each other. If you have kind of a livestock master plan that is looking at one thing, then it can't contradict maybe your NDCs that have reduction targets or things like that. So that policy coherence is something to really keep in mind. And then when looking at that resilience of food systems, I think it's really important to factor in the diversification that's needed. I mean, of course, livestock are really important, but understanding the different species that you have, looking at camels, goats, having a herd structure with different species, I think can really help livestock keepers to be resilient when different climate events are happening. And I appreciate the background that you gave of the real frequency, the intensification of climate events that are happening there. So within livestock, acknowledging that livestock keepers will rely on different livestock species, but then when it comes to crops, I think you can learn from some other countries that focusing too much on one crop is not going to build you resilient food systems. So, looking at how you can support farmers on lots of different types of crops, even looking at agroforestry, horticulture, I think that is something that really can help to improve the resilience of those food systems there. And I like the mention of soil. I think that's also, a really good thing to keep in mind. So looking at the whole system from nurturing that soil so that it can produce food for, well into the future, but then even getting to people's tables and, the food that they're eating, looking at nutrition. So, like I was saying, if you only focus on one or two staple crops, then you won't be meeting the nutritional needs of people. So I think diversification is something really important to keep in mind. Having really strong policies, of course, can help drive the climate finance that you're showing that you need. So, having a good national adaptation plan, a strong NDC, the NDC 3.0 is due in February, and this is something that as a research organization or about collaboration of organizations, CGIAR can really help you maybe set those targets, because adaptation is an important aspect of the NDCs. We always think about they're focused on mitigation, but adaptation should also be in those NDCs. And so how can you look at what are some indicators on how to track adaptation? I don't think my colleague is still here, but she's doing a lot of work on tracking adaptation. And so if you have those targets within your national plans, it helps bring in that climate finance that is very clearly needed. And then I think we heard about the importance of research and extension. I think farmer education is another thing to keep in mind, if you're working on policies, maybe you already have good enough policies and you need to move into implementation, but keeping in mind that farmers need education around different practices around climate change and how to adapt to it. And then I think ensuring that a wide range of stakeholders is involved when you're making these policies. In Kenya, one of the things that we're doing is we have a multi-stakeholder platform where we really bring together farmers' organizations working on gender and social inclusion, private sector as much as possible. So bringing everybody to the table, I think, can help improve the policies that you are putting into place. So should I also address about how international organizations can influence policies? Okay. So my other notes on that question, I would say, first of all, you really have to push international organizations like CGIAR, maybe not so much FAO, you're there, you've been working there a long time, but for ILRI, I know we have an MOU with the Ministry of Livestock, so we're getting into that space, but I think for some people in these international organizations, maybe it isn't as comfortable to come into a context like Somalia, and we need to be pushed to come to, seeing that there is a lot of potential there. So, I think kind of pushing us and saying, this is where we need to be working. I'm based in Kenya. I see so many projects in Kenya. I feel like Kenya is a saturated market in terms of research for development. So getting us out of our comfort zone and into the Somalian context, I think, would be really a good thing to do. And then I would also say, we don't want to influence your policies. We want to help inform your policies. So I think there are some international organizations that maybe if you start working with them, they will push you in certain directions. Maybe they want to see a policy on agroecology or a policy on, whatever latest terminology is the buzzword of the day. But I would say it's about what your national priorities are. And at the end of the day, it's about helping the people kind of adapt to climate change and really meet their needs, not kind of fall into that trap of, we need a policy on such and such because it's the latest buzzword, but really what are the things that you need to be building the livelihoods of people in Somalia. And then having, I think, a network to draw from. So not just relying on FAO alone or CGIAR alone, but having that wide experience, even looking into the private sector, how can they contribute? So I think having that kind of support system to help inform the policies that you need. And my last point would be having all of you there and kind of, taking the information that you need, telling us what you need, and then using that information and putting it into context is critical, because you can't just take, if I've developed something for Kenya, it won't automatically be useful in Somalia. So there's no cut and paste. It all has to kind of come through the knowledge on the ground to be useful there. So I'll stop there and hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura. And I will move on to Ibrahim, Sub-Regional Manager for Africa on GCF. Once we hear GCF, we shall hear funds, money, huge sums of money for climate change. And for a lot of nations, particularly fragile contest nations, it has been very difficult to break into that circles. Looking at the tremendous efforts that they need to put in place. I think Somalia has tried for many years, but luckily this year, one of our flagship projects with FAO has been passed through. I think it's a litmus paper, and we will take that and we will appreciate so much. And it's upon the government of Somalia and FAO to show impact and results. But again, that is too little or a drop in the ocean, the way they say it, but we'll not say that way now. We'll say now we want to implement fast. So, and Mr. Ibrahim, looking at access to climate resources, what measures are being implemented to balance accountability, particularly for fragile context? Accountability, equity, because these countries also have weak systems particularly, and they are very needy. What do you think you will advise countries like Somalia now, since they are stepping into that, to do so that they can better attract more investment and utilize the resources well? Welcome.
Thank you very much. The Green Climate Fund was established as an operating entity of UN framework for climate change. As such, our goal is to help developing countries make this transition to a low emission and resilience development pathway. So country ownership is very important to us. We're making sure that you get your policy in order, your policy in place, your policy informed by relevant data and information. For that, we have tools that can help you design your right policy. Readiness grant up to 4 million during this current cycle that you can use to put in place the enabling environment. Part of that resource also can be used for programming. Part of that resource can be used for programming. In terms of accountability, first of all, we have an intentional targeting. We knew that Somalia was underserved. Somalia was receiving some multi-country operation, but we recognize that it is important that you get a single country operation. And our executive director made a trip this year in Somalia, and in less than 1 year, you got a major proposal approved. I mean, 80 million, 79 million of grant, I believe, plus co-financing from FAO. So this is a major, it's not a drop in the ocean, it's a major development project in a context that needs investment in development, in addition to addressing short-term humanitarian operation. But very important is to have a consultation at all levels, including during the design, making sure that local communities at all levels are involved during design. Also, during implementation, they should be involved. They should be involved in implementation, in third-party monitoring of everything. And at the end of it, also, they should be there. This is a part of accountability, including the governance. So I believe when the design is well done, all those agreements should be found in it. So accountability is across the board. It's part of the DNA of intervention for sustainable development that we make with FAO or a development partner like African Development Bank. But also very important is capacity building. In fragile contexts, even at a local level, we need to build trust between farmers and pastoralists. We need to build trust also in local institutions. If you work, you have to work with them, build the capacity so that the local institutions are credible vis-à-vis the constituents. So capacity building is key at all levels, including tools like readiness or investment projects when they are ongoing can be key in building that capacity.
And I would like to thank the panelists, all of you, for making today. Unless anyone wants to have a last reflection or a word. And okay, Martin.
Yeah, I just want to return to the topic of private sector. You really need to create incentives and also de-risk the private sector. And I'll just mention 3 things that you can do. Number 1 is government should start thinking of trade credit guarantees or risk-sharing facilities so that you share the risk with the private sector. For example, if you have a company selling seeds and the company has to give out seeds to the agro dealers and then he could lose his money, if the government came up with a trade credit guarantee, say if you lose half of your money, if you lose your money, we'll give you half back. Or if you share risk with the banks, that will actually encourage the private sector to invest in areas that ordinarily are pretty risky. The other one is infrastructure. The cost of moving things around, especially bulky, low-value things like seeds or grains or livestock, is very high if the roads are bad. So again, this is where you can actually de-risk private sector investment by just building up infrastructure. The third is resilience, and here things like crop insurance, things like advisory services, for farmers, things like irrigation, just to reduce the risk. Again, it will facilitate. I can tell you that public-private partnerships are real. They actually help countries develop, especially in the agricultural sector, and because they buy down the risk for the private sector. Thank you.
I would like to add something I forgot to mention. In this multi-stakeholder engagement, of course, I think it's very important to empower the agency of women. And I think this is already at the center of the GCF because targeting 50% of women, but I think youth also. And I'd like to flag especially youth. Engage with youth trust them, give them a sense of hope. They are the ones that are going to go through this major climate crisis that we are facing. Make them proud of working to restore nature and the environment and produce food, so that being involved in the food sector, even if it's processing along the food value chain, it's fashionable. It's something you want. It doesn't have to be the sort of a last poor sector that is not benefiting. So that's just a little hint I would just like to recommend, because it's very important to engage with them. And I think in Somalia you have many youth and unemployed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Sylvia, for mentioning the potential of youth and looking also at women, which are also very hardworking people within the Somali context. And thank you so much, Martin and the team, for mentioning the private sector and how to engage the private sector. And to Ibrahim on capacity building, working with local institutions, particularly grassroots farmers, in terms of designing and implementing the project together with them. And to Laura in terms of policies, research. And we think we need more on research, particularly because we lost a lot of brains for 30 years. There's huge gap in terms of skills, and we are in talks with SGIAR to start those program exchanges within the institutions, which are just very near in Nairobi. And to all the panelists, we wish to thank you so much for making it today at these very odd hours that people are transversing to their hotels. We will really indebted, and we are really very, very happy. We really appreciate you and thank you. Applause for the team. So thank you so much. And I think we'll end that with the session, and thank you so much.